Wisconsin Eye's coverage of Campaign 2014 is being brought to you by the Wisconsin Hospital Association. For over 90 years, a valued voice supporting Wisconsin hospitals in communities like yours.
Wisconsin Eye coverage of the 2014 elections continues. We're interviewing State Representative Brett Hulsey of Madison. He's a Democratic candidate for governor. And this note, Wisconsin Eye thanks the Wisconsin Hospital Association for helping make these interviews possible. Brett, welcome back to Wisconsin Eye.
Glad to be here, Steve.
You are campaigning as the only true Democrat. So here's how we're going to work. I'm going to ask you about 8 or 9 major policy questions. And I'm not interested in the process or, you didn't get to speak to the... Let's just talk about these.
Let's go.
All right. Tax policy. What would you change, Governor Hulsey, if you were Governor Hulsey?
First of all, I want to focus on property tax relief. That is, Wisconsin is a property tax hell. We're one of the top 5 in the 5 worst in the nation, according to one study. And when Governor Walker brought forth his property tax plan before the legislature, I doubled down on him. I doubled it. And so I think we need to focus on property tax relief. Part of my $2.1 billion plan to get Wisconsin working again.
Pay to the order, Wisconsin citizens, student teachers, and public servants.
Right.
Over $2.1 million invested for Wisconsin families and workers. Brett Hulsey's plan to get Wisconsin working again. Okay,
right.
Put your prop down.
$792 million to restore that Governor Walker cut from our schools. I want to put that back in a way, first dollar, so that it provides property tax relief.
Just the homes or all properties?
I think all property taxes.
All property taxes.
I think the uniformity clause, we have to be careful how we structure it.
Yeah.
But focus on property tax relief, because that's really what's hurting most people.
But you've heard the governor, under his revenue, under his spending controls, property taxes on the average home will go down a few pennies or $1.
Right.
This December, next December, for the next 3 years. Yet your major change in tax policy, your first change, would be on the property tax.
Right. And I want to help keep Governor Thompson's promise of taking 2/3 of our public schools off the property tax roll. That'll give real lasting relief and also support our schools. Governor Walker is doing it by starving our schools and hurting our school kids.
That was my next subject. But let's stay on property taxes just for a minute. Under your plan, what would you estimate would be the average reduction in the property tax on an average home under your plan?
We haven't run the numbers that much, honestly. I mean, I'm focused on undoing the Governor Walker's reign of error, undoing his damages to our public schools. The largest cuts to our public schools, UW and technical college system in state history, when we didn't have a budget crisis. We had a budget surplus. So, getting this money back will give significant relief. I don't want to overpromise. But, $2.1 billion, that's a chunk of change. Okay,
now let's move to K-12. There's been a lot of recent changes. We now have the expansion of voucher choice schools statewide.
A mistake.
Well, okay, talk to me about K-12. What would you recommend for K-12 if you were governor?
My mother's a public school teacher. I have a master's in science ed. I taught school a little bit myself. And what we need to do is focus on helping teachers teach children to compete in a world-class economy. That includes raising standards, not just Common Core. I want to do international baccalaureate high schools.
But just to be clear, do you support Common Core?
I do, but I want to go beyond it. I want to support international baccalaureate and international standards. Our students are competing with Germany, not Mississippi, on competing for jobs in this economy. And so we don't need to dumb down our standards and spread ourselves too thin. We need to I want to use this money and other investments to focus on raising the standards and making sure everybody is ready for it to work when they get out of high school and college.
When you presented as governor a 2015-2017 budget, what would you do to the school choice voucher program?
I'd do away with it.
Completely? Not even in the city of Milwaukee?
It has not worked. The studies show that students in those programs do not perform as well as the students in the public schools. And I have a master's in natural science. I want to see the science that shows it works, and if it doesn't work, let's get rid of it.
Okay. Any PSs on K-12 before I move to the environment?
One issue is obviously background checks. If these uncontrolled voucher schools are going to stay in, they have to maintain the exact same standards as our public schools. We don't want them to have weaker bookkeeping standards or weaker teacher background checks.
So you sound like you agree with those who say we have a second system of schools, private schools, vouchers, charters, things like that. So we have developed in Wisconsin a second system of
These
schools,
are
private,
second-class schools that are
in competition with the publics.
That are at given public money. In Milwaukee, they actually raise property taxes to pay for schools that don't work as well. And I'm going to hold every school accountable to the same high standards, not let some people off the hook.
You talked about Milwaukee. Would you do anything differently for MPS?
We need to focus. 82% of the children in Milwaukee public schools, according to one UW report, are on free reduced lunch. About 54% in Madison, Racine, Kenosha, Green Bay, they all have similar problems. These systems that have high degrees of poverty, we need to focus state resources on, both to provide their parents a living wage, to my Clean Energy Jobs Plan would upgrade those schools, bring their energy efficiency, roofs, leaky roofs, all that stuff up to code and standards, and create clean energy jobs. So we just can't, turn our face on the fact that Milwaukee is the most segregated city in America. There are places in Milwaukee that have baby death rates worse than Botswana. And I've been the only person in this race that's talked about race. We have to deal with the racism issues in these large cities.
The environment. I know this is an issue that you specialized in. Let's talk about what you would reverse in current environmental policies. And if you want to start with the mine, go ahead.
Sure. Governor Walker's strip mine, instead of building one of the largest strip mines in the world, I would create a Pinocchio Hills State Park. That area is gorgeous. Mount Whittlesey, the Tyler Fork, great trout fishing, great recreation, great wildlife. And I want to create a part of the complex, Apostle Islands. We saw the people who visited the ice caves. I don't know if you got up there.
I got up there. They're beautiful.
It was amazing. But we want people to do more than stay one day. We want to create a whole recreation complex in northern Wisconsin that we can market to the world. It's our Yellowstone.
Would that create jobs? Because, as you know, one of the arguments for the Gogebic mine has been jobs.
Yeah, one of the gentlemen I talked to at the gym did the mine plan for that area in 1950s for U.S. Steel. And then U.S. Steel picked up and went to Minnesota because it's a low-grade deposit at a high angle. That's why it's not economic. And that's why you have what's frankly a bottom feeder, one of Governor Walker's big contributors, doing this phony mine plan. I worked in mining. I helped beat the Exxon mine when I worked at the Sierra Club. I actually worked a gold claim in Alaska. This is not a real mining proposal. This is being used by Wisconsin polluters to weaken our drinking water laws, our wetland laws, our clean water, and our lake protection laws, and I will undo all those things in the state budget if elected governor.
Any other priorities on the environment if you were governor?
Well, my Clean Energy Jobs Plan, we take $700 million from the Commission of the Board of Public Lands, focus that on our 9,000 state buildings, 3,000 schools, on LED lights, energy efficiency, better windows, better roofs, solar, whatever works, to both create at least 11,000 jobs, but also start addressing climate change. We can get about a third of the way towards solving global warming with just stuff that saves money, and I want to put state money behind that to make that happen.
Can one state, Wisconsin, make a difference in climate change?
We can make a difference by leading. Just like Bill Berry has a great book out on how Wisconsin led on the banning of DDT.
DDT. I'm about to read it. Yeah.
I'm reading it right now. It's a fascinating story. But actually, this goes back again. Governor Thompson had a climate change action plan in the 90s. Dust it off. It's got good stuff in it, and just start with state facilities. In Dane County, our average savings on our building was 18%. So it's a good deal for taxpayers. You save on energy bills, puts people to work, and cleans up global warming pollution.
Then my next subject is prisons and criminal justice. Our prisons are overcrowded, and Wisconsin tragically leads the nation in the incarceration of African Americans. What would Governor Hulsey do on that?
Well, first of all, I recently hired some homeless people to help me circulate nomination papers.
Well, I understand.
And
you paid them $10 an hour.
13, actually.
13?
A living wage. And 3 of them were convicted felons who were off their, one unfortunately was on papers.
Yes.
He made
so
a
his names were disqualified
His name,
yesterday.
and he made a false statement. He got through my background check. But the others were for felonies for marijuana. And you know, if you're driving in Wisconsin and you get pulled over for drunk driving, you get a civil citation. But if you're smoking marijuana, you're a felon. And I think we need to do, you know, I'm for legalizing marijuana. I work in Colorado.
Well, now understand, in 2 ways. You want both medical marijuana and recreational.
And recreational legalized. And I want to tax it to provide that property tax relief we talked about before, just like they do in Colorado.
You mentioned drunken driving. Do you think first offense OWI should be a crime, Brett?
My father was an alcoholic. You know, I have a lot of alcoholics in my family, so I have a lot of experience with this. I think that first time, and when my dad, when he was caught the first time, it was really, you know, the best way to change an alcoholic's behavior is to put them behind bars, and get them out of the bars. So I think we need to make it more than a civil citation, and I think that's when you get the treatment. That's when you have their attention most focused on treatment. We need a full wraparound plan. We've done this in Dane County with our drug court and an alcohol court. I think some of the counties are using, Winnebago County and others are using an alcohol court. If the person stays clean and sober, then it stays off their record. If they don't, then it stays on, and then we take tougher sanctions.
Jobs. The governor said, I'll create 250,000 private sector jobs in 4 years. That's not going to happen. Would you make a similar pledge as governor or during the campaign to create any number?
I am a small business person. I run an energy consulting business. I work to create jobs at clean energy plants in Jefferson, Cambria, Cassville, and in grocery stores across the state. But and anybody in private business would never promise to make $250,000 jobs. It's just, you know, it's clear that Governor Walker has never been in business. So what I will do is everything I possibly can to create both public and private sector jobs. Now, what we know is that Governor Walker cutting health care and retirement $700 million from 260,000 state and county local public servants cost us 6,900 private sector jobs. We know Governor Walker...
You're talking about the Act 10 changes?
The Unfair Despair Act 10 cost us those jobs. I will call a special session on day 1 to restore the health care, retirement, and rights of those workers.
So you would call a special session on day 1 to overturn Act 10?
Absolutely.
And I want to come back to your number. Act 10 cost us 6,900 jobs. Why? How?
According to the Institute of Wisconsin Future, this is their price of extremism, great document. But what happens is the state of Wisconsin is the largest employer in the state. Local governments are among the largest employers when they're grouped together. Schools are the largest employers grouped together. So when you take that amount of money out of the major employers in the state, they're not spending it at restaurants, they're not spending on their cable bill to watch Wisconsin. You know, so those people are having to take second jobs at, you know, flipping burgers. And that's why I believe we did not have a budget crisis. Governor Walker did that because he wanted to suck up to the Koch brothers and run for president, and I will undo those extreme changes on day 1.
We talked about the environment, but I want to talk about energy policy. Keystone Pipeline.
Against it. And worse yet, they're doing an end run around Keystone. They want to bring that dirty oil through the Enbridge pipeline from Superior to Delavan.
Now,
Enbridge
in the last few days, you gave those of us in the press room a statement that you're against the Enbridge pipeline.
I'm against expanding it with this dirty oil that's coming in until Enbridge shows it can handle itself. They have a horrible environmental record, both here, they had a huge spill in Michigan. You go down their rap sheet, and it's like, these people shouldn't be running a 2-car parade. And I want to not grant that permit for expansion until we have a full environmental impact statement and understand the total risk. And I want them to have a cleanup plan in place and show us they can abide by it.
Can the state of Wisconsin, can our PSC block that and make those demands, or is that out of the state's hands and because it's a federal issue?
Right now it's with Kathy Stepp. They are getting an air permit. And Kathy, I've been somewhat critical of Kathy Stapp, I said putting her in charge of the DNR was like putting Lindsay Lohan in charge of a rehab facility.
Do you still believe that?
Yes, I do. And that's why I will put a professional conservation manager in charge of the DNR.
Another major project that Wisconsin and I just did a show on, Badger Coulee transmission line. Do you support?
I went to a briefing on that in Wanakee last week. I worked with Alliant Energy on the Cassville power plant. We were going to take that and expand it and bring it up to environmental standards. Right now that was turned down by the PSC and it's being shut down. What I want to do is convert that plant to 100% switchgrass and biomass. Maintain that transmission that crosses the river to Iowa right there, so that would give us another link to the west. Maintain that transmission and bolster that transmission on the southwest line, so we don't have to build another line to the west, this southwest line. I'm working on a letter to the PSC to ask them to consider that right now. But I've been in the energy business since I was an energy advocate in the Carter administration. And I think this is a better solution and doesn't cause as much disruption.
My next subject, transportation and mass transit. There's a projected $650 million deficit in the next biennial budget for DOT. Would you delay highway projects? Would you find some additional revenues, or what's your plan?
My number one plan is to focus. I was driving to Milwaukee the other day and hit a pothole on I-94 that almost totaled my '87 Volkswagen Cabriolet. I mean, literally, I felt like I was going down into the pothole in the middle of I-94. We have to repair and fix the roads we have. We also have 1,100 deficient bridges in the state of Wisconsin. We saw it with a bridge near Green Bay that had fatigue issues. We don't want any collapses like they had in Minnesota. And so I want to focus on bringing these deficient bridges up to full standards, make sure we're not going to have any bridge collapses. Those are my two top priorities. My third priority is safe routes to schools. Governor Walker cut our money that allowed our school kids to safely get to school by bike, by walking, and I want to restore that money. On top of that, I think we need to get the train money back. He gave away $810 million to Illinois. I want to bring that back. I want to probably do it as a request for proposals and see if any private companies like Watco or others will provide and restore improved train service in Wisconsin. And by focusing our transportation dollars on where the bottlenecks are and where the danger spots are, we don't have to have every road in Wisconsin to be an 8-lane highway. We got to focus where the problems are. It's much cheaper to do that.
Given your last comment, do we not need to widen the interstate between Madison and the state of Illinois, Brett? Would you put that on hold?
Well, I want to look at it as, and I don't really think they did an alternatives analysis. For instance, the train track that is a few blocks from here goes straight to Janesville and hooks up to the Northwest line in Harvard and goes almost to a Chicago airport. You used to be able to get on that and get to Chicago in 3 hours. So I think maybe by spending less money on increasing people's travel choices, like they do in every other civilized country in the world, we can save money on these highway widening projects. One of the studies I think I read shows that these new lanes fill up with new traffic in only a few years. So, and if a train track is managed properly, it can equal several lanes of traffic. So I want to increase people's travel choices. I was just in Norway doing the Birkebeiner, and it's like you get off the airport, the train is the train is right there. You go to the train, the bus is right there. You still have cars there. I got to ride back to the airport in a car, but you have travel choices that we don't have in Wisconsin because Governor Walker gave away $810 million and thousands of jobs.
But 2 years ago, the Task Force on Transportation Funding said, let's raise the gas tax. It hasn't been raised since, I think, 2006. And let's, every time you and I pay our license plate registration fee, we tell the state how many miles we drove, and there's a surtax. Would either of those proposals be in the budget of a Governor Hulsey?
I want to look at the registration fee because one of the questions is, I drive old clunkers. My new car is a '97 Escort. And why does my clunker that I paid $800 for, $1,200 for, pay the same as a Hummer? So I think looking at a progressive vehicle registration fee so that, $50,000 or $100,000 Hummers pay more than your typical car does. I think that's something I'm willing to explore. I think Arizona does that.
There have, again, going back to my list of issues, giving you a chance to just talk about
Sure.
them. There's been a number of election law changes. Tell me which one which ones you would seek to overturn or repeal in your first budget?
The voter suppression one. I think I want.
What's that mean? Photo ID?
I want a voter bill of rights to say, when you go to vote, you will not have to wait more than 30 minutes to vote. There will be, you will not be hassled. You know, I want voters to be treated like the owners of this state, that, you know, the shareholders that they are, not like they're suspected criminals, you know. And so, no, I think we need to undo photo ID. Obviously, the woman, you know, near Wausau, who many senior citizens would have difficulty getting their birth certificates. And, you know, someone who's voted for 50 years, why are we hassling the, you know, we have so much bigger problems to deal with. One thing I do want to do is, the fraud that I did uncover was clerks actually turning away absentee ballots before the election because they were spoiled and not contacting the voters. I want to make sure clerks do everything they can to contact voters to make sure if an absentee ballot's spoiled, you still have a chance to get in and vote.
The last one on my list is violence. 10-year-old girl playing on a playground outside Clark Street Elementary in Milwaukee, shot in the head. Well, is it state governments? Would you recommend anything to
First of all,
fight this problem?
We had Bill Kramer, who was Republican Speaker pro tem of the Assembly, walking around with a Glock gun that's used by some, you know, mass murderers, bragging about having a weapon on the floor of the state assembly. I think we need to lead by example to say we don't need guns in our society, and violence is not the solution to our problems. This right to kill bill that they passed, you know, is just, it leads to a more...
The Castle bill, Castle
the
doctrine.
so-called Castle doctrine, but it's a license to kill bill. Anybody on your doorstep, in your driveway, or assaults your car, you know, and we need to have a discussion of how you solve problems, not by what Governor Walker did, not by stealing people's money, not by causing unnecessary protests, but how do we sit down and solve problems in a mature way and not have to resort to violence, screaming, and shouting.
Would your budget include any extension of background checks or any changes to the concealed weapon law?
Right now, I have on my desk my hunter safety card from 1970 that I could go in and get a concealed carry permit if I wanted to. I have it in a plastic bag because it's about to fall apart. But to say that qualifies me to carry a concealed weapon right now, we need a lot more training on that. Again, I'm a gun owner. I have a .45 Colt Navy that's about this long. I shoot black powder mostly. I have a 1845 Hawken, 50 caliber black powder. But to say that we need more training for people, not just a hunter safety card. It's got to be full training on when to use, because I don't want somebody to get killed needlessly because we passed a bad law.
Now let's talk about your primary opponent, Mary Burke. Where do you, what are your major disagreements? You've laid out your positions on these 8 or 9 issues. What's your biggest disagreements with Mary Burke, who was endorsed by your Democratic Party?
Sure. Yeah, I think I'm the real Democrat in this race. Let's start out with the Unfair to Spare Act 10. I debated it, opposed it for 60 hours. I was up there at the Capitol every day. And when asked by a Madison newspaper last year, she said yes, she liked part of it, that would take away workers' health care and retirement benefits. Workers, going back to the 50s, have negotiated those benefits instead of pay increases. Those were duly bargained for. I will restore those. She said yes, they should be taken away. I'm a former union vice president, and I just don't give up that as easily as she does. Again, we did not have a budget crisis. We had a budget surplus according to the Nonpartisan Fiscal Bureau. The other key issue difference is on outsourcing jobs. The Sierra Club outsourced 42 jobs. People were giving a banker's box, an hour notice, and a security guard. The whole division was outsourced. After that, we formed the union. I became vice president of that union. And so I have fought outsourcing, both these unfair trade agreements and that, for decades. Trek, under Mary Burke's co-ownership, she's a co-owner and board member, has outsourced about over 99 99% of their manufacturing of bikes to China and foreign countries under, her family's watch. And I'm going to do everything. Imagine how many people would be working in Wisconsin if those 99% of Trek bikes were made here. And I want to do Buy Wisconsin First. Why are we using state money to buy a Chinese-made Trek bike to give our police officers to bike around on? I'm going to get them an American-made bike. I've been shopping for one myself, and if Trek won't make them for us, I'll buy them on eBay.
Okay. Last week when I interviewed Chairman Tate, one of the questions I asked was about you, and he said you're not a serious candidate. He didn't want to discuss, these are his terms, not mine, gadflies who were out for publicity, gimmicks. Do you want to respond to that? Well, let me ask the question this way. Are you sorry that when you, in your first weeks of campaign, you talked about using KKK hoods and chicken suits?
Actually, those were Republican Party hats. And I had been trying to get the white corporate media up there at the Capitol, you know who I'm talking about, to cover racism in this legislature for 3 years. I'm part Native American myself. They went after us for mascots. They went after the Bad River tribe with a strip mine. They went after in-state tuition for Hispanics. They went after, health care for 65,000 people, 29,000 kids, many of whom are minorities, and nobody would cover it. So, but when I go to hand out some Republican Party hats, suddenly people are paying attention. And sometimes you got to bump it up to get the white corporate press's attention to cover racism, because people don't want to talk about baby death rates worse than Botswana and Milwaukee, because it's embarrassing.
So you're not sorry you did mention either of those?
Not a bit.
Okay.
And I still have the chicken suit. Mary Burke, when I go to an event, she tends to, I was speaking at an event in Janesville, she canceled. She's afraid to debate me. If she can't debate me, she's not going to be very good against Scott Walker.
Okay. Earlier in the year, you told some reporters that you were dealing with some personal issues. I don't want to know what the personal issues are, but I just want to know, have you made progress dealing with those?
I had a situation a couple of years ago that forced me to deal with a lot of childhood abuse issues. My father was a violent alcoholic.
Okay.
And, I've gotten counseling. I take care of myself every day. I do my 16-minute workout, which I'm trying to get you to do too. And, good dog walks. And so I'm sort of practicing the stuff I need to do to get me healthier. But what my plan is to get Wisconsin healthier, because we have been through hell for no reason because of the abuse of Governor Walker and the Koch brothers. And I'm going to do everything I can to get Wisconsin working again.
So, but just to sum it up, emotionally, you feel qualified to be governor?
Absolutely. I mean, I tell people, first of all, they say you'd have to be crazy to want that job, and I say you don't have to be, but it helps. And you know how crazy things are. This is a dysfunctional family, which is why I feel right at home up there. And if anybody can fix it, it's me.
Well, final question: how are you going to campaign? You're not the chosen candidate of the Democratic Party, so
thank God for that. By the way,
how do you win it?
Nobody picks losers better than this Democratic Party.
How do you win the primary, Brett?
I'm going to be at the farm breakfast on Saturday morning. I find when I drive up to Wrightstown and talk to a dairy farmer about my plan to get all the manure in Wisconsin and turn it into cow gas so that we can run our own vehicles and homes on it, they've never seen one of their elected leaders before. And they're excited about people who have real ideas that help them. I have a real plan. The Cap Times called my opponent's plan aspirational, which is kindly for squishy. I got numbers down to the penny of how much I'll give your school back. $24.8 million for Madison Public Schools, for my kids. So, making it real is what I do.
I understand. Thanks, Brett.
Don't forget, vote for Brett.
State Representative Brett Hulsey of Madison is a Democratic candidate for governor. The primary is August 12th. Brett, thanks for coming into Wisconsin.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.